When I opened that door and saw him standing there, soaked, smiling, and wrong, I knew he'd kept his promise. I just never thought love could crawl back from the grave. It all started after the night I swore I'd never stop waiting for him. He always used to say he hated goodbyes. Not because they were sad, but because they made things feel final, like doors slamming shut that should have stayed open. The morning he left, the sky was this dull, sleepy gray, the kind that made everything look half alive. He laughed when I cried, brushed a thumb under my eye, and told me I was being dramatic. "I'll be back before you even miss me," he said. Then he kissed my forehead and added, "If anything ever happens, I'll come back for you." Always I remember how I smiled through the tears, believing him completely. He had that kind of face, the kind that made you think promises were unbreakable things. That was 2 years ago. The crash happened on a Wednesday. It had been raining all day, the kind of rain that feels deliberate, heavy enough to erase everything it touches. He was driving back from work, crossing the bridge near Hollow Creek, the one everyone in town complained about, but no one ever fixed. They found his car the next morning, nose down in the river, half swallowed by reeds. The passenger door was open, the seatbelt unbuckled, and there was blood on the steering wheel, but no body. The police said the current probably took him, carried him downstream, maybe all the way to the reservoir. They called it a tragedy. I called it impossible. The days after blurred together into a strange gray fog. People came with casseroles and condolences, filling my kitchen with voices that sounded too careful. Everyone kept telling me I needed closure, as if closure was something I could pick up at a store. When they held the memorial, I stayed home. I couldn't stand the thought of hearing his name said in past tense. I sat in our house instead, staring at the dent in the couch where he always sat, tracing the curve of it with my hand until my fingers went numb. His jacket still hung by the door, his toothbrush still sat next to mine. Sometimes I'd stand in the doorway and whisper to the empty room, "You said you'd come back," like maybe the words themselves could summon him. The police gave up the search after 3 weeks. His mother stopped calling after 6. Friends drifted away after 8. I stayed. I told everyone it was because I couldn't face moving somewhere new, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was that I was waiting. I checked my phone every night, even though I knew there'd be nothing. I'd scroll through our old texts just to hear his voice in my head. The last one he ever sent still burned behind my eyes. "Promise me you'll wait." No matter what, he'd meant it as a joke, I'm sure, but sometimes I'd lie awake and wonder if he'd meant something more. By the time the seasons changed, I'd memorized the way the silence sounded. The wind through the trees, the hum of the fridge, the distant sound of water moving somewhere under the floorboards. There were moments, small ones, fleeting, and when I swore I could feel him near me. Once as I was falling asleep, the mattress dipped beside me, like someone had just lain down. Another time I woke up in the middle of the night and caught a whiff of his cologne, that sharp, metallic scent he always wore, even though the bottle had been buried with him. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe grief has a scent, maybe memories leave residue, but it didn't feel like nostalgia. It felt like breath. It was in late October that I first heard it. The night was cold enough to make the window fog. I was sitting by the sill, half drunk on cheap wine, watching the reflection of the forest in the glass when I heard my name, soft, drawn out. "Em?" It wasn't the creak of the house or the sigh of the wind. It was deliberate, shaped. I froze, every nerve standing at attention. Then it came again, quieter, but closer. "Em, Ma." I held my breath so long my chest ached. For a long moment there was only silence. Then something moved outside, not the rustle of branches, but something heavier, slower, like footsteps pressing through wet ground. I turned on the porch light, the bulb flickering weakly against the fog. The trees at the edge of the yard stood still, black and skeletal. The air smelled of wet leaves and decay. Nothing moved. But when I leaned closer to the window, I saw them. 2 handprints, pressed into the glass from the outside. They were smeared with mud, the fingers long and distinct, the palms leaving dark, dripping stains that slid down the pane. I reached out and touched the other side of the glass. It was still cold. The prints were too fresh for that. My mind scrambled for logic. Maybe kids, maybe animals, maybe anything that wasn't what my heart already knew. I backed away from the window slowly, afraid that if I blinked I'd see a face behind it. For a moment I thought I did, a shape in the reflection, faint, pale, hovering just behind my own. But when I turned, there was nothing there, only the echo of my heartbeat in the silence. That night, I locked every door. I even pushed a chair under the handle of the bedroom door like a child. I told myself I was being stupid, just grief. I thought, just another trick of the dark. But when I woke up the next morning, the entire room smelled like him. The scent was stronger now, sharp and heavy, like he'd just stepped out of the shower and walked past me. I opened the dresser where I'd kept one of his old shirts. It was folded exactly as I left it, untouched. I picked it up, pressed it to my face, and felt something wet cling to my fingers. Mud. Not dust, not damp air. Mud, cold and sticky like the riverbed. I dropped it, heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur. For a long time, I just stood there, breathing through the fear, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The room was silent again. The smell lingered, thick and sour, until I thought I'd choke on it. I wanted to tell someone, but I knew what they'd say. They'd smile gently and tell me grief makes people see things, hear things. They'd remind me he was gone, that it was impossible. Maybe they were right, but a part of me, the part that still waited for the sound of his key in the door, didn't care about logic. It didn't care about what was possible. That part of me whispered that he'd promised. And promises, the kind made in love and desperation, don't always die with the person who made them. For days after that night, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. The handprints, the scent, the whispers, grief playing tricks on me, that's all. I even washed the window, wiped every trace of mud from the glass until it gleamed. But no matter how many times I scrubbed, faint outlines always came back when the light hit them just right. It was like the prints had sunk into the glass itself, etched by something that didn't want to be erased. I started keeping the curtains drawn. The house grew smaller somehow, the air heavier. Every sound began to feel personal, like the walls were listening. The nights were worse. I'd hear things, small things at first. The soft click of the porch steps, a slow creak near the back door, a whisper too faint to be words. Once I woke to the sound of dripping water. I followed it to the hallway, expecting a leak, but the floor was dry. Still, the dripping didn't stop. It sounded rhythmic, wet, like something breathing through water. I told myself I was losing it. So I did what people do when they're afraid of their own minds. I distracted myself. I started cleaning every corner of the house, playing music just to drown out the silence. But the more I tried to make noise, the quieter everything else became. The air inside felt different, as though sound itself didn't want to move through it. When I'd walk by the mirror in the hallway, I'd catch something behind me. A shadow, faint, moving just a fraction too slow. Once I even said his name out loud, half hoping, half begging. Ethan. The second the word left my mouth, the lights flickered. Just once, a pulse like the house had taken a breath. That night, I dreamed of water, cold, black, and endless. I was standing on the bridge where they found his car, barefoot, wearing his old hoodie. I could hear his voice calling from below the surface, calm and familiar, telling me to come closer. When I knelt and looked down, I saw a reflection, but not of me. It was him smiling, that crooked smile, reaching up. And then I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my window, slow, dragging, deliberate. Gravel crunching under weight that didn't belong to the living. I didn't move at first. I just listened. The steps circled the house once, then stopped. Silence stretched so long that my heart began to thud in rhythm with the ticking clock. Then came the whisper, clear this time, pressed right against the glass. Emma. My name, drawn out, wet and low, like someone speaking through waterlogged lungs. Every instinct told me to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I turned my head toward the window, and there, through the thin veil of fog, I saw him. It was only a glimpse, a pale shape standing in the mist, tall, still, facing me. His eyes caught the porch light just enough to gleam, though there was nothing alive behind them. I blinked, and he was gone. When I finally found the courage to step outside, the ground beneath the window was soaked, as if someone had just climbed out of a river and stood there dripping. Muddy footprints led halfway across the porch before vanishing into the yard. I followed them until they disappeared into the grass. That's when I noticed something small near the steps, his old keychain, the one with the scratched metal tag that said "Forever Yours." It was rusted, half caked in dirt, but I knew it immediately. I fell to my knees, clutching it so tight the edge cut into my palm. I don't remember coming back inside. One moment I was kneeling outside, and the next I was sitting on the couch, still holding that keychain, my fingers streaked with mud. My clothes were damp, though I hadn't stepped into water. I stared at the fireplace until the first light of morning seeped in, thin and colorless. Every nerve in my body screamed that something had shifted, that I wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few days, I tried pretending everything was normal, but things in the house began to move when I wasn't looking. The picture of us on the mantel would tilt slightly each morning, always to the left, the way he used to lean when he hugged me from behind. The radio sometimes turned on by itself, always playing the same song he loved, Fields of Glass. I didn't even own that record anymore. One evening, I caught my reflection smiling a second too late after I did. That was the first time I actually screamed. By the end of that week, I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I moved to the couch, clutching a blanket around me, staring at the shadows stretching across the ceiling. The whispering never stopped. It just changed. Sometimes sounding like my name, sometimes like laughter, sometimes like breathing in sync with mine. I tried recording it once, but every playback was silent except for a faint rush of static that almost sounded like the river. I wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, he was keeping his promise, but the thing that kept whispering my name didn't sound like love anymore. It sounded like hunger, and though I didn't know it then, that was the night he found his way back inside. I never thought the promise would become a doorway. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt like it was breathing, each exhale whispering through the cracks, each inhale rattling the window as if something enormous pressed its face against the glass. I stayed wrapped in the old blanket, my phone in my hand, the faint light from its screen my only anchor to sanity. Every few minutes I'd open the camera app, hover it over the dark corners, convincing myself I'd see nothing, and I didn't. But sometimes, when I played back the video, there'd be faint clicks like fingernails tapping wood. By morning, the fog had rolled back over the trees thicker than ever, swallowing the house in its gray shroud. I tried to open the front door, but it refused to budge, as if the hinges had fused overnight. My phone signal was gone too. Only the hum of silence and the faint scratching below the floorboards kept me company. I told myself it was rats, but rats don't breathe. And I could hear breathing, slow, wet, ragged. I decided to keep moving, to find something, anything that explained what was happening. The house had been my grandmother's, and though I'd grown up visiting during summers, there were places I'd never gone. The cellar, for one. She used to keep it locked, warning me never to go down there. "That's where we keep the past," she'd say with a half-smile that always felt wrong. The key had hung on the wall by the kitchen, a tiny brass thing shaped like a heart. When I was little, I thought it was pretty. Now I couldn't look at it without feeling sick. I found the key still there, dull and cold to the touch. The cellar door groaned open when I turned it, the air that rushed out reeking of rot and damp earth. The steps were narrow and uneven, carved into stone. I hesitated at the top, the flashlight trembling in my hand before forcing myself to take the first step. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My breath came out in foggy puffs even though it was midsummer outside. The beam of light cut through the darkness, landing on walls covered in symbols, etched deep, blackened by time. Circles, crosses, and what looked like eyes. Hundreds of them, all carved to face the same direction, toward the far end of the room. That's where the sound was coming from. Slow dragging, something moving in the dirt. I whispered his name before I realized it. "Michael!" My voice broke in the silence. It wasn't supposed to, but it did. And when I said it, the dragging stopped. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then something shifted in the corner of the room, and the flashlight flickered. I moved closer, unable to stop myself. The smell grew stronger, metallic and sweet, like blood that had been sitting for days. There was a shape half buried in the soil, a box or maybe a coffin. The wood was old, soaked dark, and when I crouched down, I saw initials carved into the lid. M.I.K. his. My pulse crashed in my ears as I reached out, brushing dirt away. My fingers came away red, though I didn't see any wound. When I blinked, for a second, I thought the letters had changed. It looked like they were still being carved, as if an invisible hand was etching them deeper, stroke by stroke. A whisper rose from the box, faint, broken, and familiar. "You waited." I stumbled back, my flashlight clattering onto the stone. The whisper turned into sigh, then a low moan that rippled through the air. The walls trembled. The eyes carved into them seemed to shift, following me. I grabbed the light, backing up toward the stairs, but the steps behind me were gone. Where there should have been an exit, there was only stone. The breathing grew louder, closer. And then I saw him, or what was left of him, crawling out of the box, dragging himself forward with jerky, uneven movements. His skin was pale and too tight, his eyes sunken but glowing faintly, like embers that refused to die. His lips moved, and I heard my name again. My knees nearly gave out. He looked exactly like Michael, except for the way his mouth didn't close right, the way his fingers ended in something black and pointed. He stopped a few feet away, tilting his head the way he used to when he wanted me to smile. I couldn't breathe. He smiled, cracked lips stretching too wide, and I saw that his teeth were wrong, too many, too sharp. His voice was a rasp when he said, "You promised you'd wait forever." Something inside me broke. I screamed, and through the flashlight, the beam spinning wildly, catching glimpses of him, his face twisting, his jaw splitting open wider than any humans could. The walls pulsed, the carved eyes leaking dark streaks. I turned and ran toward where the stairs should have been, clawing at the stone until my nails split, and then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the door reappeared. I burst through it and slammed it shut. Gasping, sobbing, shaking, the light outside had dimmed. Dusk had come early. I locked the cellar and threw the key into the fireplace, watching it melt into a dull puddle of brass. But as I sank to the floor, I heard it again, the dragging, not below this time, above. The sound came from the ceiling, slow and deliberate, as if something was crawling between the floorboards of the attic. And when the first drop of blood hit my cheek, I realized that whatever had come back for me hadn't stayed in the dark, and I never thought the thing wearing his face would follow me upstairs. I didn't dare move at first. The blood on my cheek was warm, fresh. It slid down the corner of my mouth, and I tasted iron before I even understood what had happened. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Above me, the sound came again, something heavy shifting its weight on the beams. Slow, careful, listening. The ceiling groaned like an old chest under strain. I looked up, and for the briefest moment the boards seemed to bulge inward, as if something pressed its hand or face against them. I wanted to run, to burst out the door and into the woods, but when I looked toward the front of the house, the windows were black, not dark, black, a kind of void that swallowed the light. I couldn't even see my reflection anymore. It was as though the world outside had been erased. The blood fell again, this time in thicker drops spattering across my hand. I wiped it away with trembling fingers, but when I looked down, I realized it wasn't dripping from above anymore. It was seeping out from the edges of the ceiling, running in thin lines down the wallpaper like veins. The house itself seemed to be bleeding. Then I heard him. Not his voice exactly, something imitating it. The same cadence, the same warmth that used to make my name sound like a promise. "Lena," it whispered, soft and coaxing, as if from the attic itself. "Don't hide from me." I pressed my hands over my ears, shaking my head. "You're not him," I whispered back, but my voice broke. "You're not." The whisper turned into laughter, low at first, then sharp, crawling through the walls like electricity. Every picture frame rattled. The floorboards beneath me trembled, and I swore I could feel it. His hand, or something like it, pressing against the floor from above, dragging across the wood. I had to see. I don't know why, but I had to. Maybe part of me still believed he was somehow there, trapped, waiting for me. Maybe I just needed proof that he wasn't. So I took the old ladder from the hallway closet, the one that creaked even under my lightest step, and placed it beneath the attic hatch. My fingers were slick with sweat. When I reached up and pulled the cord, the hatch opened with a slow, echoing sigh. Cold air poured down, smelling of soil and old roses. For a moment, everything was still. The ladder wobbled as I climbed, each step groaning like a warning. When my head rose above the edge of the attic floor, the beam from my flashlight caught the dust, thousands of tiny motes floating in the air, like ash. I scanned the space. It was empty. Just boxes, old trunks, the remains of forgotten years. Then something moved. It wasn't a sound. It was a shift, like the air itself bent around something unseen. I aimed the light toward the far corner, and the beam flickered over a shape crouched low. At first it looked human, but as I stared I realized it was wrong. Its arms were too long, its shoulders jutted at sharp, unnatural angles, and its head turned slowly toward me. The movement deliberate, creaking, as if the bones inside had fused together and were forcing themselves apart. The face that looked back wasn't Michael's anymore. It was pale and hollow, the mouth stretched far beyond where skin should end, the lips torn in a smile that wasn't a smile at all. The eyes burned faintly like coals buried under snow. Why did you bury me? It rasped, voice broken and doubled, two tones overlapping like a man and a woman speaking at once. You said you'd wait. I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my grip and rolling across the floor, spinning light wildly through the dark. The thing crawled forward, the sound of its hands dragging across the boards like wet rope. It was faster than it should have been, moving in jerks that didn't match its limbs. I jumped off the ladder just as it reached the edge, its hand bursting through the hatch, fingers black and sharp, nails scraping deep grooves into the floor. I screamed and ran, slamming the hatch shut, throwing the hallway chair over it. The house went silent again, but not empty. I could still hear it breathing above me, slow, patient, waiting, and when I pressed my ear to the wall, I heard a whisper so faint it barely reached me. I found the ring, Lena. I'm coming down. And that was when I realized. The thing up there didn't just remember his voice. It reminded us. The night didn't end after the attic. It only deepened. Every corner of the house seemed to pulse as if the walls had veins and the air itself had learned to breathe. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, or what was left of it, pressing against the ceiling, whispering things that sounded like love letters written by the dead. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was over, that whatever I'd seen had crawled back into whatever hell it came from. The house was still again, quiet enough to make me believe in peace. I made coffee, opened the blinds, tried to let light in, but the moment I turned to set the mug down, there it was on the table, a damp ring left behind by something cold. The smell of the river returned, faint but distinct, and my heart lurched. Then I saw him, outside, standing in the yard, motionless, head tilted just enough to make my stomach twist. His skin was gray now, almost translucent, and his eyes reflected the light like glass marbles. He shouldn't have been able to stand, he shouldn't have existed at all, but he was there, exactly as he'd promised. I didn't run this time. Maybe it was madness, or maybe it was that small broken part of me that still wanted him. I stepped outside barefoot, the wet grass sticking to my feet, the morning air sharp in my lungs. He didn't move until I was halfway to him. Then, slowly, he smiled. You came, he said. His voice gurgled, thick with water. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fall to my knees, but instead I reached for him. My fingers brushed his, and for a heartbeat he felt warm again, alive. His eyes softened just like before, and I thought, just for that moment, that maybe love could outlive anything, even death. Then he pulled me close, and I realized what that warmth was. It wasn't life, it was decay. Heat from something that had been burning for too long beneath the surface. His hand slid up my back, and I could feel the slickness of his skin, the faint movement under it like water trapped beneath thin ice. Come with me, he murmured, pressing his forehead to mine. You said forever. The words struck something deep inside me, because he was right. I had said it. I'd said it the night before he died, when we lay tangled together in the dark, whispering promises we didn't think the world would test. I'd said it, and now he'd come to collect. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The air around us grew cold, sharp, suffocating. I could hear water somewhere, no, feel it, rising from the ground, curling around my ankles. The world blurred at the edges, colors draining until everything looked like river water. His eyes flickered, a flash of something that wasn't human and wasn't quite gone either. Don't fight it, he said. You wanted me back. When the water reached my waist, I stopped struggling. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the way he looked at me, like I was still the girl he'd loved. I let my head rest against his chest. It was hollow, the sound inside like a distant current, and for a fleeting second, it felt peaceful. Then I opened my eyes and saw what surrounded us. The house was gone, the yard, the trees, everything replaced by endless black water stretching in every direction. He smiled and his lips cracked open, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. Now we'll never be apart, he said. His voice echoed from everywhere, from beneath the water, from inside my skull. The last thing I remember before the darkness swallowed me was his hand brushing my cheek, gentle, almost loving. When I woke, I was back in the bed, dry, breathing, the sun pouring through the window. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, then I felt it, the indentation on the other side of the mattress like someone had been lying there all night. And on the pillow beside me, the same silver ring I'd buried with him. It glistened in the morning light, damp with river water. I touched it and something in me shifted. My skin prickled, cold spreading through my veins like a quiet tide. I could hear him, faintly, humming our song somewhere deep in the walls. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I just felt his. Maybe that's the curse of love. It doesn't end. It just changed shape until you don't recognize what you've become. I keep wondering when it happened, when loving him stopped feeling human. Maybe it was the night I answered his whisper, or maybe it was the moment I let him pull me under. I tell myself I had no choice, but a part of me knows I wanted it, that I still want him. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I feel him beside me again, cold, patient, waiting. Maybe this is love. Maybe it's damnation. What are we now? Tell me, would you have let him in too?